research shows that people stay indoors, whether at home or at the office, for at least 93% of their time. And this may possibly have increased to 100% for some in the current pandemic during the lockdown. Such a situation can increase the rate of exposure to poor indoor air quality. Apart from that, if we consider the healthcare system, you have clinics, hospitals, healthcare centers that are constantly on the move, testing and treating COVID-19 patients, amongst others. How do they ensure that the indoor air quality is constantly maintained at an optimum level, posing little or no risk of cross-contamination? Similarly, with the region opening up gradually, you have malls, airports, offices, homes, supermarkets. Everyone is still trying to understand how to prevent as much cross-contamination as possible, and indoor air quality is a crucial component in the scheme of things. Today, to understand this rather intricate concept, we have with us a panel of experts who've kindly agreed to be part of the webinar today. So let's welcome them. So today we have with us Angela Abdul Noor. She's the Group Germ Control Senior Officer at Boyka Public Health. Angela develops and implements infection control policies designed to reduce or eliminate pathogens in facilities while taking into consideration local and international standards and requirements. She also provides technical germ control support for Boyka branches across the Middle East and the East Africa region. We also have with us Marcus Latner. He's the Managing Director at Eurovent Middle East. Marcus has worked for more than 12 years with the international HVACR industry, and he established the Middle East chapter for Europe's largest HVACR industry association called Eurovent. Eurovent Middle East is the region's industry association for energy efficiency, indoor air quality, and cold chain solutions. And the association has, within a very short time, become a partner for local authorities and a stakeholder in regulatory development in the region. And finally, we have Michael Rollins. He's a consultant in healthcare and environment infection prevention. Michael joined UCLH Infection Directorate in 2004 as the project manager of the Department of Health. He has commissioned research studies into emerging cleaning technologies and has conducted a study of enhanced patient environment cleaning and impact on HCAI within the ICU. Michael also designs training tools for healthcare environment hygiene. Michael is an active member of the Healthcare Infection Society UK, patron of the National Association of Healthcare Professionals UK, and he is a member of the Education and Training Advisory Group. Thank you everybody for joining us today. And without further ado, let's start with the discussion. And let's start with the first question. This is a question that I'm opening to all the three panelists. You all can answer however you all want. How important is indoor air quality in general, and how does its importance increase with a pandemic like the COVID-19 one?
Okay, I'll start if I may. I think it is obviously a very important measure, and in terms of measuring indoor quality, is potentially an issue that relates to the efficiency of removal of potential pathogens and viral particulate from that environment. So it is a marker of efficiency. So if we're able to detect microorganisms in the air, then we need to look and trace back to source. Obviously, clinical interventions are looking at prevention of dispersion of aerosols, but filtration and air changes per hour are extremely important values when it comes to validating indoor air quality.
Yeah. Well, okay. Regarding the indoor air quality, the importance of indoor air quality, well, as we all know, it has a significant impact on human health status. So it can cause short-term treatable effects like fatigue, dizziness, or headaches, but it can also cause long-term effects like lung diseases or heart diseases. Knowing all this, you can see the importance of always trying to improve and check the indoor air quality in our facilities, especially during cases like the COVID-19 pandemic, where people were asked to remain indoors for about 100% of their time.
Yeah, I would follow my colleagues here. The indoor air quality topic is something we have discussed over many years already in the HVACR industry, and which we try to promote. The pandemic now, I think, is underlining the importance to really consider indoor air quality solutions and the way we design buildings and how we design ventilation systems for working spaces, occupied spaces. This is a very important part of the work we all are involved in, be it from the part of manufacturers, from building owners, from the consultant community, but also from facility management. In terms of the pandemic, we should keep in mind the main transmission way is through the virus we exhale through droplets and aerosols. And it's not only that this infection, that this transmission way is just a COVID-19 thing. This is happening when we look at influenza. This is happening also with other viruses, of course. So a preparedness for the prevention of airborne transmission of certain pathogens is of great importance. Shanti, I cannot hear you.
Yeah, no, me neither. No.
Perhaps while Shanti is readjusting her audio, the second question that I have here is how aware are people about the importance of indoor air quality in the pandemic scenario?
Yeah, well, from my side, I think that people are becoming more and more aware about the importance of implementing preventive measures in general due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but also about the importance of indoor air, especially that now studies are showing that the coronavirus can persist in the air for about 3 hours. So the knowledge that the infection with COVID-19 can occur as a result of being exposed to contaminated air might spark anxiety among some individuals. Hence, people are implementing social distancing more seriously and are becoming more concerned about the quality of indoor air in their facilities and how they can improve it.
Yeah, we also see an increased interest in solutions for better indoor air quality. However, the problem is in many buildings you have to look really closely what is possible. It's not really easy to replace a whole ventilation system in a short period of time. So this is for us, it's a long-going project, a long-going initiative where we have to try to educate people in the market to first of all request indoor air quality solutions, the consultants to understand what opportunities they have, the building owners be ready to invest in it, and the general public to follow simple rules when it comes to the equipping occupied spaces and how to deal with fresh air intakes.
Mm-hmm. I think in the UK there seems to be some confusion about the impact of airborne viruses. We're seeing a lot of mask wearing, which is mainly to protect others as distinct from themselves. Obviously, coughing, sneezing, talking and laughing can all distribute viral particulate into the air. And there's a definite correlation between the viral load that is put into the air and the acquisition of infection. So in that case, it's very much about dilution, is how to remove that particulate as quickly as possible. And this is particularly challenging, as you mentioned, Marcus, in terms of modifying systems within existing commercial buildings, particularly to increase that airflow and increase the air changes. And also, I guess in UAE, the environmental conditions with high levels of temperature, humidity, and potentially dust having an impact on the main HVAC system in terms of its overall efficiency. So from a mechanical perspective, it's critical to maintain that equipment to optimum, operations to offset the increased viral load maybe generated within inside the building.
Yeah, if we look at the UAE, you're absolutely correct. One of the points is that we have a higher percentage of recirculated air in closed buildings. That's due to the high environment temperature. So if you would have to operate cooling and ventilation systems with only fresh air, you would have a huge energy penalty during the hot months. In any case, recirculation alone is not a bad thing. The importance here is that the systems are operated in the best way possible. That means that you have an air filtration stage in the recirculation, and that you have a fresh air intake. In a pandemic time, we recommend to increase this percentage of fresh air intake, but that especially that you do ventilate and have a higher exchange rate than in the cooler hours of a day, of course during the night, in order to care for a proper dilution of whatever contamination is happening within a building. As to the face masks, we see that this is working. It reduces the virus load in the exhaled air. The less of virus particles we have flying around in a closed space, the better. So we are looking at the combination. If we recommend anything, we look at the recommendation of the measures which has been imposed by governments. Reduce the amount of people in a building at the same time. Reduce the time people spend at the same place. Have social distancing rules in place. Wear face masks. And then look at the mechanical solutions which you have, but that has to be assessed by the facility management people or by a consultant in a building to look what actually is the ventilation system like. And increase fresh air intake, increase open windows if you can have more fresh air in. That's and especially do a proper filtration of the air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess with recirculation, it really emphasizes the importance of maintaining the filters at the optimal level and potentially introducing UVC radiation within the filter area so that active disinfection is taking place.
Agreed, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Shanti, yes.
Michael, Angela, can you all hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank God. Yes, please continue. I'm sorry I interrupted. Okay. So we spoke about the awareness that people have regarding indoor air quality currently and how we can maintain optimum indoor air quality for them, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So there are a couple of questions. For instance, Mr. Rehan Ahmed says, how can we assess the air quality in our homes or working space? And what can we do to improve and sanitize the surroundings?
Okay. Yeah.
Take that up?
Yeah. Environmental monitoring is very challenging, particularly when it comes to viral load. Probably the most efficient and accurate method is actually evaluation of particle size. Because viruses obviously have a particular size, quite small, and if you're doing particulate counting, you can actually detect the size of the particles that are floating in the air. Excuse me. So that may be one practical method. But, perhaps Marcus can update us on the standard procedures from a mechanical point of view.
That is really difficult to say, because every building is different, and you have to look what your system, what your office looks like. Do you have a central ventilation system in place, or do you have only room air conditioners in place? This is things which absolutely make a difference in the way you deal with improving the situation. I would say for a company which is operating in an office space, the management should approach the landowner and demand an assessment of the situation and demand an explanation. What is the system in place? What is the landowner doing in order to improve the situation? Due to the absolutely uncomparable situations of everyone, it's very difficult to give out general recommendations. Very easy indications perhaps could be measure the humidity in your office. To measure humidity should be fairly simple. There's lots of devices on the market for not much money, which you can purchase a humidity sensor, a device which gives you time readings and temperature and humidity levels in a room. So that is a very simple step. We recommend an average humidity somewhere between 40 and 60%. That's where immunologists have said that this is the best protection, provides the best protection for people's immune system against any infections. And it should also help by improving the overall situation. If you see that the temperature, that the humidity levels are below that or above that, then there would be already an indication that you should have the property owner addressing the situation. But in terms of particle loads in a closed space, this is near to impossible for people like we all are. This has to be done through specialists, through special consultants who can come in with special devices and measure that. I would just say again, the steps you should look at is that you have an air exchange, a real air exchange. If you have the opportunity to open doors and windows, if it's not affecting you from the outside air, then if you're working in a hot, dusty environment, that is not a solution, of course, at all. But it's very, very difficult, and this is a tricky thing. I mean, we always talk about indoor air quality, but the people who are, most of us, we don't really have the opportunity to assess the real situation. That can only be done more or less on a managerial level, where you have the leverage, where you have the money, and where you have to find the willingness to go and improve the situation, assess the situation.
This would, I guess, potentially apply to most facilities. But when we talk about healthcare facilities, how does it change? I mean, healthcare facilities, you really can't open the window and have fresh air in. So how do we understand, how to prevent cross-contamination in a healthcare facility that is closed completely?
I think the advantage of healthcare institutions is they are designed to minimize infection. The systems are relatively closed and can be isolated. They also have controls in terms of the number of air changes per hour. So the efficiency and the calculation of air change and removal of potential pathogens from that environment is very accurately structured and measured. So I think that's a huge advantage we have in healthcare. The observation from my previous experience with MERS-CoV in Saudi Arabia was most of the problems were not so much within the ward areas, but in the public spaces, such as the entry to A&E and the large congregation of people coming in. So you're relatively in a dynamic environment where social distancing at that stage was not observed. And the large groups of people were basically cross-contaminating and infecting others because the air controls within that type of space cannot be controlled. You have direct access from the outside with doors opening and closing. So the air pollution in those particular areas can be very, very high. And it was only when specific triage facilities with the air handling systems in place were instituted that the infection rate was significantly reduced.
Okay.
Yes, and healthcare sectors, as Michael said, usually the system is well implemented, is well monitored. They have a preset schedule for the regular maintenance of their system. Not to forget that areas are all well divided in a way not to have cross contamination even between rooms and different sections in the healthcare. So I think yes, it's usually things are more controlled in healthcare sectors.
Provided they follow the standards.
Correct.
Yeah.
Maintenance is extremely important. I think there's been an interesting case that we looked at in terms of the cruise ship in Yokohama and the rate of infection that moved through that facility. And I suspect a lot of that was to do with the air handling system, particularly for those who were not on the balcony and were within a very contained environment. And even during the lockdown, that there was air transmission between the various cabins.
Okay. So so that brings me to the point that Marcus also raised. So basically, there has to be regular HVAC maintenance in any facility.
There should be regular HVAC maintenance in all cases. First of all, you take a huge penalty in energy efficiency if you do not maintain your equipment properly. Second thing is you deteriorate your equipment. You would have more troubles, more broken parts, more emergency calls if you do not preventive maintenance. So maintenance is always a very, very crucial part of everything we do. In this, what I would like to underline in reference to our situation now, we see or we hear from the Middle East that a lot of people still go and wash the air filters. They do not replace air filters, they just wash them in a bucket of warm water and place it back. For that, people have to understand, you should never wash an air filter, you should always replace it. Talking about the classic bag filters. If you have a metal mesh, that's a different thing. But then you should not only wash it, you should disinfect it. For the bag filters, you should always replace them. You should always be sure what kind of filters you buy and what kind of filters you use. Filters should not be do not have to be replaced every 2 weeks. Wait until the pressure drop in the system is high enough, and the system should be able to tell you when this point is reached to go and replace a dirty filter. But never wash them, replace them, buy a new one. Make sure that you buy certified filters, that you make sure that the filter you're purchasing fulfills the requirements, fulfills the standards, and this is only ensured by a certified filter. Make sure that you also check the certification pack with the certifying body, that it's still valid, that it's not a fake or a forged one. This is most important. When it comes to, because I see one of the attendees has asked the importance of AC duct cleaning. Here, I would say usually once a year should be a good rule. There is no requirement for a higher cleaning rate of anything just because of the pandemic. Viruses do not reproduce outside of the host, so they do not sit and breathe in the HVAC system itself. What is very, very crucial is if you have buildings which have been closed down for a couple of days or for a period of time because of the lockdown, before you open the buildings for people to go in, have the HVAC system starting up and run it for at least 24 hours or 36 hours before you allow people to come in. Because during the time when you do not run these systems, you will have a lot of dirt, a lot of dust, and a lot of pollutants settling in the ducts. And through running this system for a while, you do blow out quite a lot of this dirt. And then after running the system for a while, then have the space disinfected.
A question, Marcus, if I may. is that when these buildings are locked down and potentially the HVAC system wasn't running and the relative high humidity in UAE, is this a situation where potentially mold could accumulate within the ducts and the HVAC system itself?
Yes, it is. Molding is always a big problem because you have a huge difference of temperature outside and inside. That creates a lot of condensation, but this you have at all times anyway. So we usually never recommend to shut off HVAC systems, even in a building which has no occupancy for a period of time. You should run the system at least for a limited amount of time every day in order to avoid accumulation of mold and too much condensation later on. But again, this is if we talk about maintenance routines. If we consider that the maintenance is done properly, you wouldn't have a higher requirement for maintenance just because there is a pandemic in our minds. But again, this is an assessment from manufacturers. We are not healthcare professionals, but due to the fact that the viruses itself do not breathe externally of the host, we don't see that there would be an accumulation. That would be a problem. It's more other pathogens, as you said. Molding is a factor and should be taken care of again at all times. And it should be assessed if the system is designed properly to prevent molding. And if that's not done, then you have a problem.
Yeah, I mean that's the dispersion of spores, which can cause a particular problem. And obviously in healthcare, we're very concerned about aspergillus, which can be created in there and dispersed through the system. Sorry, another question for you, Marcus. I understand that passive UVC irradiation of the filters are helpful in controlling the accumulation of mold on the actual filters themselves, particularly adjacent to the cooling towers.
Cooling towers are a different system. Cooling towers are external systems. They do not touch the airflow inside. In the cooling towers, the major concern would be the formation of legionellas. That's usually taken care of by additives to the water, which you use within the cooling towers. UV devices can be very effective in the fight against pathogens. However, they need to be installed by professionals because you have to have a certain spectrum, as I understand from what I've read and what I've looked into. The UV light needs to meet and needs to happen in a certain spectrum in order to be effective. Every pathogen has its own corridor where it's affected by UV light, so this needs to be done by real professionals. But that, yes, is definitely a recommendable part of equipment which we consider useful and which makes sense to look into.
Okay. Angela, you had something to add to that?
No, I guess Marcus covered the points related to molds. As we've seen this case in one of our branches and one of our clients, where because they turned off the HVAC system during the pandemic, during the lockdown period. So after that, they had molds all over the place. So that's the importance of not turning off the HVAC system, especially in countries with high humidity, and the proper inspection of the system before reopening, and the proper cleaning when needed, and the disinfection, of course, of all areas.
Okay. In fact, Boyka has certain services for maintaining indoor air quality, right, Angela?
Yes, well, we do disinfection, mainly we do cleaning of AC ducts, and we do disinfection of areas and surfaces in all sectors. So yes, so whenever we do, as part of the germ control service, we try to provide a full plan for our clients to protect themselves, be it related to surface disinfection, to hand hygiene, and to the indoor air as well.
So what kind of requests or what kind of demands come from clients when it comes to indoor air quality in specific? What has the experience been like for you all?
Well, most of our clients now, as I gave an example before, they had some mold problem related to the turn because they turned off their HVAC system during this period. There's also a high concern, as we discussed before, related to how the SARS-CoV-2 can spread through indoor air. So that's where we're recommending to ensure proper ventilation, trying to introduce fresh air as much as possible, especially in certain countries. Maybe this might not be possible, so that's where we try to request proper maintaining of HVAC system. As we do not provide the maintenance of the HVAC system, we ask them to get a proper contract with a professional company to do that, as not everyone follow those standards, and not everyone actually clean their air duct system. So as Marcus said, we do recommend people to clean their air duct system on yearly basis, their air ducts. However, this is not always implemented. So I guess now, after the pandemic, people will start seeing the importance of improving indoor air.
Okay. When you're talking about cleaning of air ducts, what kind of products are essentially suitable, and what are the best practices in terms of cleaning? So somebody over here asked us earlier on about sanitizers. So a lot of people apparently are using sanitizers on a regular basis. Is there a possibility that VOCs in the sanitizers have an adverse effect on the indoor air quality?
Yeah, I would say if you spray them in your active HVAC system while you have people in the building, it's not really recommended, because people then would inhale aerosols, which are not really very healthy either. But sanitation, the best thing is always to go back to the manufacturer of HVAC equipment and get a maintenance recommendation. They will tell you how to maintain this equipment in the best way. When it comes to air ducts, to the whole systems, I'm unfortunately on that point, I'm not a specialist. Perhaps, Angela, that is your...
Yeah, when it comes to air ducts cleaning, we usually we have to check of course the duct layout, to see the access doors, to see how areas are connected, in order to isolate certain areas when needed, in order to prevent cross-contamination, and to understand the contamination source as well. Yes, we do not, for cleaning of ducts, we do not use sanitizer. It's more like a mechanical action, where you use, in order to loosen the dirt that is inside the duct and try to vacuum it. After that, we will do the disinfection. And of course, disinfection, it depends on the product that you are using. So some products may be acceptable to be used inside ducts, and others no. So it depends on the active ingredient and the type of products you are using. Yes, as Marcus said as well, when we do the treatment of the ducts, and also when we do the treatment of the area as well, the area should be empty. People cannot be present during the treatment, of course. And even after disinfection, so we clean first the ducts and then we disinfect the ducts, because while cleaning you have particles that will be released, of course, in the area. So after that, you will have to also disinfect the area as well, and make sure that there are no residues from the ducts in the spaces where people stay. And people can enter the space after a certain time, of course. They cannot enter it directly after treatment.
Okay. I'm just going to speak about some of the questions that people are asking over here. So somebody, this was a question that we were going to address a little later on, but Mr. Jean-Paul says, what practical measures can we do to improve the air quality and remove germs from an office or apartment in which a COVID-19 patient was quarantined? Is there something specific beyond what we've already discussed?
Sorry, go ahead.
No,
anyone of you can take it.
Yeah, I think here we have to stress again on the importance of providing proper ventilation, making sure that their system is properly maintained. The type of filter will affect. Maybe Marcus can also explain more on this point. The type of filter that is present in the HVAC system will also affect the contamination. In addition to that, of course, they have to disinfect the area. Knowing, well, it depends, Kamena. It depends also on the period, since when the person was infected and since when they left the area, knowing that based on studies, the virus can remain active on surfaces for around 2 to 3 days, depending on, of course, the humidity, the temperature, the type of surface. So taking all of this into consideration, they might also have to implement proper disinfection for the area and the items that were used in this space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any of you would like to add to that, Michael, Marcus?
Well, I guess it's a terminal cleaning in a healthcare application. This is where area decontamination usually comes in as an appropriate process, where it could be UVC or hydrogen peroxide vapor to actually control the whole of the and not being totally reliant on manual cleaning. So it's a belt and braces approach. Obviously, cleaning is job number one, and then followed by an area decontamination process would bring that that facility back into use safely.
Okay. I'm going on to the next question. Okay, so Mr. Jean Chalhoub asks, being in a country with high humidity like the UAE, what would be the acceptable or safe humidity indoor level to be safe from having mold in the HVAC system or on furniture?
Well, I would say the humidity level of the indoor air is not the biggest problem. That should be kept always between 40 to 60%, and that itself would not necessarily lead to molding of any surfaces. It's more the problem you have in spaces where you have a lot of humidity, like really high humidity from condensation. And that's there you have to look at surfaces which have a temperature difference or a frequent temperature difference where you would have a condensation existing. But an indoor humidity level of 60% would not necessarily lead to a molding. If you have air exchange, if you have the proper ventilation system in place, this is not a problem. So anything below 60%. In a corridor between 40 and 60% is a recommended humidity level for indoor air.
Okay. Next question that we have is, how are inline duct purification systems effective?
That depends on the system.
Okay. Can you explain what inline duct purification systems are, Marcus?
Well, you have a couple of, to my knowledge, there's some UV devices which you can install, but again, all those, I've heard even people already coming with a suggestion to put macrobiotic molecules into the air to saturate the air with positive bacteria to kill the negative ones. There are a lot of solutions on the market which may and may not work. It always depends on the system. Overall, what is the capacity? What is the technology used? Is it appropriate or not? Is something which we would be not able to tell you how effective that is, because that depends. Is the equipment really doing what it claims to do? There, I always recommend look for certified products, look for third-party independent verification, and have an expert planning that into your system, because you can come even with a very good and excellent UV device. If the airflow and the air volume is not matching the performance of this device, it is more or less useless. So all these devices need to be assessed and planned and installed by experts.
Mm. Yeah, no, I agree. It comes back to the effect of UV in terms of airflow coming through the system. But I think it's working backwards in terms of the hierarchy of controls. Is ideally you want to stem the source of contamination before it reaches the HVAC. That's job one, to assess how contaminant has been generated. Obviously, then the second step is filtration and controlling the flow of that, contaminant through a system, and then the effective radiation or disinfection of that zone, if you will, so you can contain by filtration and maintain that appropriately in terms of filter changes. But again, it comes back to the zone effect of a particular intervention. And as Marcus mentioned, UVC has to work within a narrow spectrum of light emission and certain power per square centimeter. I think if there's any guidance, is that a lot of these developments were created by military and developments in aerospace, where people were dealing with very high level of contained environments. And there's been quite a number of technologies come out of that. And cold plasma, for example, is another one that generates rapid hydroxyl decontamination very, very effectively. Again, combining with hydrogen peroxide and UVC. So, these are, I think one of the others was titanium dioxide that was reacting with the UVC to give a photocatalytic disinfection of a targeted area within an HVAC system. So there is a number of technologies that are out there. But as Marcus says, this is a very specialized area, and due diligence in sourcing the correct supplier and installation is very, very important.
Okay, if we want to talk about disinfecting indoor air in a space, so what would you guys say is what are the ideal steps that have to be taken? Number one, we understood from the discussion right now that you're talking about maintaining your HVAC system regularly. If there is a possibility of opening windows and doors to allow fresh air to come in, then we must do that. Filters need to be replaced and not washed. This is something that Marcus also mentioned to us. Is there anything else that we can consider the best practices of maintaining indoor air quality in such a scenario? Something that we have missed out on discussing?
No, I think we also mentioned the importance of following the preventive measures set by the WHO, such as wearing face masks, which will reduce the level of exhaled particles in the air. Of course, reducing a proper cleaning. I think housekeeping inside offices and areas will also reduce the level of dust and the level of particulates that will be released in the air. In addition to proper disinfection, of course, of areas and surfaces will also help in the reduction of the spread of germs in facilities.
Okay. In terms of that, we have a question by Hiro Jun Ladoris asking, is fumigation recommended as part of procedure for disinfection? Isn't fumigation mainly for insects and pest control? Why do people think that why is fumigation used by some disinfection companies? Is it something that should be done?
No, we do fumigation for pest control only.
Okay, so apparently a few disinfection companies are advising fumigation.
No, fumigants are usually, the fumigation technique that we implement is usually toxic. So there are many precautions that we should take, and we only do it for pest control, for the pest control services.
Correct. Okay, great. So moving on, let's talk about the importance of training operatives in disinfection procedures and in air duct cleaning. Is there something specific that needs to be done in terms of training them, in terms of the kind of PPE used, and for health and safety?
Well, I think, yeah, the training will depend on the sector, on the type of tasks that they are implementing, the areas. But well, the first thing that people should be trained on is, well, I would say proper implementing proper hygiene, hand hygiene, proper respiratory hygiene. All this will help in reducing the spread of viruses and infections, and of course the proper sanitization of the surfaces. In such case, for example, you will train the housekeeping team on how to regularly clean and disinfect the frequently touched surfaces, and as part of the training, well, this is what we do with our clients, posting awareness posters for everyone entering the facility, be it in common areas, in restrooms. Now the WHO is really trying to raise awareness for people on the importance of closing the toilet lid before flushing, as this might also spread viruses in the air. So yeah, I think the most important training to be provided to people and facilities and to staff is related to those preventive measures that they will be implementing on daily basis, and of course understanding the importance of keeping a safe distance between each other.
Marcus, Michael, any comments on training and health and safety?
Well, I agree. It's always advisable to really look carefully into training procedures. We see that a lot of people are not equipped properly by their employers and send them to certain buildings to do their job. Nowadays, in this time, please make sure that you get your personal protective equipment. That is, if you're really into cleaning spaces, we recommend wearing glasses, wearing masks, and also protective equipment for the body. See some suits, some gloves. I see there was a question where I believe from Hero Yoon Ladoris is again, who said according to the guideline we have to leave the rooms used by confirmed cases undisturbed for at least 3 hours before cleaning to let the aerosols settle into the surfaces. And then he's mentioning if blower is used, then it will spread again into the air. Those are exactly these kinds of questions where it's clear there's a lack of training. If a company sends their people to clean an already infected place with a blower, that goes definitely against every precaution. And here the responsibility of everyone involved is asked for. Do not send people in high risk environments without proper equipment and without proper training.
Correct.
One of the issues that we've been discussing in the UK is for people returning to work. Obviously, they're coming back with raised awareness and concerns and anxiety coming back into those environments. What we are talking about is engaging with the Human Resources Department and communicating to staff that they do have a role and responsibility of re-entering the workplace, both to protect themselves and to protect colleagues, so that compliance with all the issues of hand washing and social distancing are extremely important, and that they need to comply with that. One of the other issues is really the understanding of how the training is delivered to the support services staff also coming back into that environment. There needs to be a change made. And one of the pieces of advice that is given is really in terms of environmental cleaning is to slow down, think about what you're doing, and actually be assured that you're actually covering all those areas correctly with the appropriate materials and disinfectants. The actual coronavirus itself is very fragile and can be quite easily taken care of in manual cleaning, but obviously it needs to be done thoroughly and, as I say, with confidence that the whole of the surface area has been covered.
Okay. Should we be concerned about cross-contamination of the fresh intake air when using heat recovery wheels? This is asked by Scott Sinclair.
Yeah, this is something that I could answer with no, you should not be concerned. Heat recovery wheel is a component of an air handling unit which is used for keeping humidity levels and to use the thermal energy of the exhaust air mixing with the indoor air, with the intake air, in order to save energy. So these components are there for a reason. We do not recommend to switch them off, and I wouldn't be concerned about cross-contamination because of the heat recovery wheel, specifically if we talk about recirculation anyway. So before being concerned about heat recovery wheels, I would be more concerned, do I have a filtration stage at the recirculated air?
Okay. Somebody is also, we've spoken about UV technology. We've touched upon how it is a very specialized sector in terms of maintaining indoor air, disinfecting indoor air actually. Somebody, Mr. Jean Chaloub asks if there is any respiratory effect from machines that produce chlorine dioxide that claims to purify air. Are there any studies on that? I mean, is this something that does purify air, and does it have any side effects?
I think this is for Michael, right?
Sorry?
I hope Michael can answer that, because I have not much knowledge on the chemical side of the chlorine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to recall. I guess going back 5 or 6 years ago, we saw a whole range of technologies emerge in terms of area decontamination, and chlorine dioxide was one that came through. Obviously, it's a noxious chemical, and appropriate PPE and sealing off of an area is required when using these types of technologies. Typically, in the healthcare, we don't use these systems because they are so disruptive to the environment, and manual cleaning remains the priority. But there is safety issues. Effective, yes, it is. But again, it comes back to systems and process and appropriate training of the application. And I guess the biggest failure that I've observed is manufacturers' claims of how much cubic capacity these fogging machines can achieve, is I think they're slightly overstated. And I think the problem is with achieving suitable coverage, the zone of effect of the piece of equipment, the contact time of the chemical on that particular surface are very, very difficult to validate. I know that hydrogen peroxide has been more thoroughly investigated by the pharmaceutical industry, because they require a very high level of cleanliness and sterilization standards within their facilities. And there's been the development of enzyme indicators which allow that to be validated quite easily. So I think the problem is, I call it adaptive technology, is that something that works in one area, people will think it should work in another area, and they don't consider the full factors of implementing that practice in a specific type of facility. As I say, it really comes back to a mathematical equation of the size of the space, the creation of this area decontamination process, and the validation. And typically it's very, very difficult to do unless you're dealing with a very specialized contractor who is experienced and certified in this area of work. But as a general practice, to go out and buy fogging equipment and use it yourself as a contractor is not a very sound practice.
Yeah, regarding the chlorine dioxide, there are different technologies that are using them. There are even the pouches that you can put on you, and they will release chlorine dioxide to disinfect the air around you. I think as long as, since the WHO and the FDA have approved different products related to chlorine dioxide, but they all have a certain exposure limit. So as long as you're within this exposure limit, you should be safe, and it's effective.
Okay. In general, I guess all of these alternate, all these disinfectants will require a certain level of safety on part of the operators, right? They may be disinfecting the environment, but they can have side effects if people are in the room for a prolonged period of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And I believe everybody who has ever cleaned his own bathroom with one of these things knows how bad it feels in the respiratory tract. And please let that be a really clear warning for everyone. If you feel that when you inhale that it is acidic in your respiratory tract, then it's not good. The body warns us. The body gives us very clear signals. So we need to be ready to understand that this is a signal. And if you are in a working situation where you have to use one of these agents, and you do not have the proper equipment, and you feel it is bothering you, go and say, stop. I need a better protective equipment. The body is giving us clear indications when we are not protected in the proper way.
In fact, I was wondering, are there any kind of eco-friendly products that can be used to disinfect air? You have a lot of enzyme-based or probiotic kind of products that exist in the market for cleaning. Is there something that is applicable for disinfecting air?
You mean not chemicals? You mean?
Not chemicals, yeah. We have come across over time. We've come across a lot of disinfectants that are more probiotic in nature or more enzyme based. Is that something that's there for air? Is something I wanted to just know. I mean,
I think it's very difficult to control aerosols, and as I mentioned earlier, the validation of process where you're looking at contact, it's very, very difficult within an aerosol to actually validate that process. I think it comes back to basics. It's people that are contaminating the environment, or the external environment contaminating the internal environment. If you can identify the source, that's your starting point. When it comes to active purification of the air, the best and cheapest option is filtration or dilution by air exchanges, or whether it be natural ventilation or mechanical ventilation.
Okay.
I would agree. I would also agree to that. Sorry, Angela, go ahead a bit. If you perhaps you can add to this question of more natural detergents.
Well, I think as Michael said, and in addition, we use a safe chemical that you need a certain contact time. You need to check the contact time. You need to understand better the application of the product. So I guess it's easier. It's not applicable as far as I know with non-chemical products.
Great. There's a question regarding fogging machines. So that brings me. Can you all tell us what kind of machines can be used to sanitize air? So we've heard of aerosols, we've heard of fogging machines, we've heard of sprayers. So can you all just give us some clarity on these kind of equipment?
Well, you can use cold fogger, ULV machines that produce ultra low volume droplets that will release very small droplets to disinfect the indoor air in a room. That's what we would recommend.
Cold fogging. Okay. And that is for indoors. So yeah, somebody's asked here about fogging machines. Is this a recommended procedure for disinfection indoors? Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments on that, Marcus or Michael?
Well, regular fogging, or it would be a procedure I would see more recommended for healthcare facilities where you have really high contamination.
Yeah, it's much more of a surface treatment. Is that we're hoping that air is being exchanged satisfactorily. This is much more of a surface cross-contamination, so that we're looking at all those high-touch surfaces. Basically, it's kind of seen as a catch-all for suboptimal cleaning. And this is really where training comes into play, is that with our healthcare support services staff, we want to empower them with the knowledge of the important role that they're undertaking and giving them the appropriate cleaning materials to actually remove soil and pathogens from surfaces. Coming behind with area decontamination is really the embraces approach, and really is not as a regular standard unless it's in particular high-risk, high-contamination areas, such as theatres, acute areas, ICU, isolation, and infectious diseases isolation. But as a general rule, trying to disinfect facilities by fogging or aerosol or vapor does require the first step in physical manual cleaning. The only time that you would actually switch that around would be actually to go to a three-step process. Is if you are decontaminating a known area of contamination, to make it safe for your cleaning staff, you may then use a fogging to actually pick up the majority of the risk factor that's in there to make it safe for them to enter and do manual cleaning. Then you could, in fact, disinfect afterwards, but probably again by manual cleaning or manual disinfection rather.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Ahmad Khan has asked, Angela, if you could just repeat what you said about the cold fogging machines, if you don't mind.
Yes, we use a cold fogging machine which release ultra low volume droplets that will those droplets will remain in suspension in the air for a certain period of time that will help disinfect the particles, any airborne particles present in the air.
Okay, great. So we're at the end of the conversation and the discussion. Any parting comments that you all would like to give our attendees?
Yeah, from my side, I would say I wish everybody really well. Please be careful if you are from facility management, if you are tasked with the job of cleaning spaces. Please make sure you wear protective equipment. What we know about the virus and what we don't know about the virus is one thing, but maintaining proper procedures should be followed at all times. So protective equipment, especially when cleaning spaces and when handling air filters. That's a point perhaps which I missed before. If you're exchanging air filters, wear protective equipment and dispose of the filters in a sealed bag. Make sure that this filter is not lying around somewhere and the whole dirt comes around. So please make sure you follow procedures. If you are not sure about proper procedure, go back to your company and demand that. It's always overlooked that the ones on the forefronts are the ones that the weakest in the chain, and this needs to be very carefully assessed.
I think my advice would be for anybody who is involved in the cleaning side of things, cleaning and disinfection, is slow down. Think about what you're doing. Think first before you act, and be very conscious of your own personal safety. If you assume that every surface potentially is contaminated and you're applying the correct process, then you'll be in a much better place and safe. Familiarity and just common practice. We're going to be living in a different world for an extended period of time, and we can't slip back into bad habits. So it's very, very important, and particularly to focus on high frequency touch point.
Yes, and I would, in addition to all this, it's really important to remain, to keep ourselves informed, as there are still studies going on regarding this virus, and to understand better about how it is spread and to understand better its nature. So it's very important to stay informed and follow any new guidelines that are being issued by the WHO.
Thank you. We have a question from Mr. Sharif who asks, do we need to clean first and then disinfect? I think the answer is yes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We always have to clean before disinfecting, no matter what type of disinfectant is being used, as some disinfectants might not work in presence of organic matter, others they will become weaker. So it's very important to clean first.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, Michael, Marcus, and Angela. It was a real pleasure having you all on our panel today. And thank you to all the attendees who made this session very, very engaging with your questions and comments. And if you all have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We will definitely ask our panelists whenever they have time to answer them. And I'd like to thank all the sponsors, especially Boycom Middle East, for sponsoring this session, and our key sponsors, Reza Hygiene, TCL, and Intercare. And we will be announcing our next webinar shortly. And thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks a lot.
Goodbye.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.